Wondering if your match is real? Well, here's how to find out. Hey, welcome to Online for Love, your #1 resource for dating by the numbers. Today we're going to be going over an online dating app called Tinder, but more specifically, we're going to be talking about the scammers and catfishes that you could encounter on Tinder, how to avoid them, and how to get rid of them. Before we get into all that though, I do need to tell you guys about our Tinder 101 hub. It consists of 70+ articles that will give you the information needed to master Tinder. And another indispensable necessity is our Tinder opening line formula. Using the Tinder opening line formula, we've discovered that users have received 3 times the response rate that they had before. You can find those necessities in the links in the bios down below, along with our online dating app quiz and more. So in order to make this video a bit easier to comprehend, I've broken it down into these 4 sections. The first of which is what is catfishing on Tinder, then reading the signs, then tips on staying safe on Tinder, and you've met up with the catfish, what to do. So before I jump into the first one on the list, I did want to ask you guys to be sure you are hitting like and subscribe. Seriously, it really does help push our videos out so that more users can utilize this information from us here at Online for Love. We super duper appreciate it. So moving on to number 1 on my list, which is identifying catfish on Tinder. When we talk about what a catfish is in general, it's basically somebody who is making a profile that is not really who they say they are, and they're utilizing it in order to mess with people's emotions, and this can lead to them just toying with people's emotions because they like doing that, all the way to them trying to steal your personal information and your money. A good catfish profile will look like real profiles, but there are definitely ways that you can distinguish a catfish profile from a real profile. So how does it actually work on Tinder? To be honest with you, Tinder does not have a ton of fake profiles, as it can be difficult for them to set that up, as they need a phone number in order to do so. This deters a lot of bots and scammers on this app, because having to have that phone number attached to your profile means that they're going to have a ton of phone numbers that they need to utilize in order to make a new account. There are definitely still bots and catfishers and scammers on Tinder, don't get me wrong, but they're significantly less than a lot of other online dating websites. So this is going to move me into number 2 on my list, but before I jumped into that, I did want to mention to you guys again our Tinder 101 hub. Our Tinder 101 hub consists of 70+ articles that give you the information needed to master Tinder. From this information, you can build yourself a great profile, you can make some more matches, and that will lead to more dates. So this moves me on to number 2 on my list, which is reading the signs. So you've been interacting with a profile for a little while, and you're pretty sure that they're not a catfish, but you're also not 100% sure that they're not a catfish. So what can you actually do to try and find out if they are a catfish or not? Well, let's go over a few different types of catfish profiles that you can look at. Some are more obvious than others, and maybe you can try and utilize that information to find out if the profile that you're interacting with is indeed a catfish. And the first type of catfish profile I want to talk about is the celebrity profile. Now there are some that are more obvious than others, where they're using AAA actors and musicians and whatnot, but there are some that will find some lower known actors and famous people and utilize their photos, because one, there's a lot of content of them, so it's very easy to catfish as them, as you can have a host of endless photos. And 2, because they're lesser known, a lot of people might not know that they're actually a celebrity and think that they're talking to somebody who looks like that. Another type of catfish profile that you can find is one that will just send you links. A lot of these catfish profiles are trying to get you to go to a phishing website. So what they'll do is they'll say, hey, you can chat with me on this website because I don't really use Tinder a lot, or they're trying to direct you somewhere where they have nude photos or something along the lines of that. Of course, don't click on any links that pop up on Tinder, especially if they're short URLs and whatnot. It's going to be a very dangerous situation for you, and they could steal your information. Another way to tell if it's a catfish account or not is if they ask you for money. No person is going to be asking a Tinder date for money if they really do need it. That's what GoFundMe is for, and then trying to get X amount of money from you from somebody that they just started talking to on Tinder is not very realistic, and they're definitely trying to scam that money out of you. You are never going to meet that person. Speaking of never meeting that person, that's the other tip that I want to give to you too, is that they'll never agree to meet in person, or if they do agree to meet in person, they never actually show up and come up with a million excuses. If you've tried to set a date with this person, and even if it's one time, for me, I'd be like, okay, this isn't working out. But if it was 2 times, then definitely you know that this person isn't who they say they are, and you should just move on. Another hint of information that you can get if they are a catfish profile or not is if they have no photos, or they have just terrible quality photos that don't actually show any detail as to what they might actually look like. In the majority of cases that I've personally interacted with these catfish profiles, they've only had one photo, and that's all they need to convince a lot of people to get the information that they need. So if a profile has, of course, no photos, just one photos, or terrible quality photos, and you can't even get a visual of what that person looked like, then they're definitely more than likely a catfish. So this is moving me on to number 3 on my list, but before I jumped into that, I did want to talk to you guys about our Tinder opening line formula. So while you want to avoid scammers on this website, for those people who aren't scammers, you actually want to get responses from them, and you can utilize our Tinder opening line formula to do so. Our Tinder opening line formula has proved to be successful, as people have had 3 times the response rate by utilizing this formula. So if you feel like you're being left unread too many times, definitely check out our Tinder opening line formula to get more success so that you can actually communicate with your matches to get more dates. So this is moving on to number 3 on my list, which is staying safe with dating tips on Tinder. While doing anything on the internet, it's super important that you don't give your vital information to anybody else who is online. And this can especially seem enticing to a lot of people, especially if they feel like they're having a romantic relationship with somebody that they met online. Don't send them your information. They would never need that information for anything other than to just steal from you and then ghost you. So the first tip I want to talk about when it comes to safety on Tinder is that if your gut is telling you something, it's probably right. You should really trust your instincts. If you feel like the thing or person that you're talking to is in fact a bot or a scammer, then you're probably right, and you should just stop talking to them. And if you know that they're a bot or a scammer, absolutely use that report button on them. The next tip I have for you is to actually use the tips that I just used in the last section. I mean, there's a bunch of things that you can check to see if they are a catfish or a scammer. So be sure you are utilizing those tips to make sure that you're avoiding bots and scammers. Another thing you can do is check their verification status. So on Tinder, you can verify your account by sending selfies of yourself, which they then compare to the photos that are on your Tinder profile. So this can be a great way to make sure that you are talking to at least somebody who looks like the photos on their profile. Another tip I have for you is to reverse search photos. So if somebody is, for example, utilizing celebrity photos and their photos are popular on the internet, you can absolutely take that photo and throw it into a search engine and see the real celebrity's name pop up that they're using the catfish you with. Do note though that there are websites that make AI faces that are completely unique too. So if you do this reverse search and nothing comes up, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not a catfish at the same time. Another thing that I have to say that I can't say enough is to not share any codes or personal information with any users on Tinder. Doing this is going to jeopardize your safety, and it really is something that should be obvious at this point. And the next safety tip I have for you is to keep communication on Tinder until you actually meet up. You don't want to be giving people your phone number or even your social media accounts, because if they do get a hold of that, they then know what your information is, and it will make them really easy to keep contacting you. You want to make sure that if you are meeting up with somebody on Tinder, that you keep your conversation on Tinder until you know that they're a real person and that you feel like you can trust them with that information. So this is going to move me into number 4 on my list, but before I jump into that, I did want to ask you guys to be sure you are hitting like and subscribe. Seriously, it really does help push our videos out so that more users can utilize this information from us here on Online for Love. We super duper appreciate it. So this is moving into number 4 on my list, which is you've met up with a catfish. What to do? So you are meeting up with somebody, you're not sure if they're a catfish or not. I highly suggest that the first time you meet them, you always do it in a crowded area. Meeting somebody new when there aren't a lot of people around is definitely not a good idea, as they could take advantage of you and there aren't people around to help you out if that does happen. Ideally, meeting during the day at a coffee shop would be a great scenario for you to meet somebody, as there's a lot of publicity in a coffee shop. It's during the daytime, which is of course the best time to meet somebody new. And if it's not going well, you can leave that coffee shop within 30 minutes and it won't be awkward. The next tip I have for you is to keep your location settings on your cell phone. Now, a lot of people are worried that we're always being tracked, but honestly, if something does happen and worse comes to worse and you're kidnapped, let's say, say, the location on your cell phone is going to be a clue to investigators as to where you are in that moment. Next tip I have is to call a friend. If you have met up with a catfish and you know they're a catfish, immediately call your friend and totally make up a scenario where you're like, oh, you have this? I gotta come help you? Let me come help you. I'm sorry, I gotta go. This is a really great tactic to use to get out of the situation and get yourself to safety. If you've met up with a catfish and you feel like you are in danger, absolutely call the police. It's a very serious thing to meet somebody offline and they're not actually who they say they are. They could be doing some terrible things, so informing the police about this is a great thing to do. If you have actually met up with the catfish, and a really important thing to do is to be sure that you delete all of your personal information that is on your account if it is there, and you unmatch them. If you have your Instagram account on there, let's say, they might be able to find it and then they can keep stalking you from there. Of course, the next tip I have is to report the catfish. You're basically just doing the entire Tinder community a service. If you did meet up with somebody, they weren't who they said they were, and you made sure that their account is actually deleted and off of the app. And of course, the last tip I have is to learn from your mistakes. If you did meet up with a catfish and you were in a dangerous situation, be sure to be more cautious in the future when you meet up with other people offline. And honestly, if you meet up with somebody, be 100% sure that they're not a catfish. You shouldn't be meeting up with questionable people from the internet. So of course you want to avoid success in finding catfishes and scammers on Tinder, but if you want to get more success in making great matches on Tinder, I have to suggest our Tinder 101 Hub. It consists of 70+ articles that give you the information needed to master Tinder. And another indispensable necessity is our Tinder opening line formula. Using the Tinder opening line formula, we've discovered that users have received 3 times the response rate that they had before. You can find these necessities in the links in the bios down below, along with our online dating app quiz and more. If you guys want to see some more content from us though, you can check out the videos popping up on my left and right here. And I did want to ask you guys one more time to be sure you are hitting like and subscribe. Seriously, we super duper appreciate it. I'll catch you guys here next time on Online for Love. See ya.